Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be finishing up our retrospective look at the Spawn Blood Feud miniseries with the final issue, Spawn Blood Feud number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in September of 1995, we can see here the cover, which, by the way, is my favorite of the 4. I really like this cover a lot. The whole central focus on Spawn with the background of the broken plate glass window with the blood dripping off of the shards, and Spawn's in the coils of some sort of giant reptilian serpent tail, which I know seems really weird at this point, but once we get inside the book and start getting into the story, this is going to make more sense, I promise. Story, Alan Moore. Art, Tony Daniel, Kevin Conrad. Letters, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Todd Broker. Additional thanks to Philip Timper, Andy Troy, Pat Martin. We see here that the story picks up exactly where it left off in issue number 3, with Spawn struggling as he is basically caught by the neck by the car that he was driving. Of course, Sansker mutilated the car in his attack on Spawn, and then used the broken windshield frame to essentially act as a trap / noose, I guess, to hold Spawn as the car drove over the edge and fell into the water. And at this point, Spawn is sort of contemplating just letting the car take him down, as he thinks to himself it's always night down here, and that if he remains down here, it will kind of be the end of all of the problems that he's facing. However, this is completely overlooking the fact that if he does let the car take him down and he dies here again, that means he's instantly transported back to the 8th circle of hell, where he has to serve the Mabalja for all eternity. Of course, Spawn does come to his senses as he continues to sink down at the end of the pier, and realizes that he can't let things end here, as he also begins to hear the voice of the costume Letha once again calling out to him. He uses his strength to free himself from the car and begins to swim towards the chest that he locked the costume in, realizing that even though he discarded the costume and locked it away, that the costume still calls out to him, still desires him, and he's actually starting to reciprocate that desire at this point, as he understands that the costume does in fact fully love him in a way, and that this costume is the only thing that seems to desire him unconditionally no matter what. And even all of the people that, he's trying to help, his former friends, his former love in Wanda, they've moved on from him, but the costume still wants him. The costume is still technically there for him. And he decides to swim into the darkness to free it from the trunk and unite with it once again. Also, I really like the borders here, where you get the right side of Spawn's face over here and the left side of Sansker's face. Even though it's not really drawn attention to, I thought that was a super cool way of filling out the sides of these pages. And, it wasn't necessary. You could have made these panels larger, but it was just a really unique touch, and I really appreciate what was done here. We then reach a 2-page spread with a couple of panels on it. Now, what's interesting about this is that you would assume the story picks up on the left-hand page. It doesn't. It actually picks up in the panels that are on the right-hand page, and then goes to the 2-page spread for the final part of the story in this 2-page sequence, which, while a little bit odd in its layout, is actually kind of cool. I can't think of a lot of other times where I've seen this done. As we see a police cruiser carrying Sam and a uniformed officer, they're hot on the trail of Sansker after Sam discovered his partner Twitch's body crumpled up and broken inside of Sansker's office in a cabinet. And Sam is now planning on arresting Sansker. He also asks on what Twitch's condition is on the radio. They say he's in surgery and it doesn't look good. However, of course, due to the error in which all of these books were released, we already know because of last week's video on Spawn 35, which, by the way, came out the exact same month as this book, that Twitch is already back to work and he's recovering just fine. And that just goes back to the whole absolute mess of story and, chronological order that all these books were at the time of their original release. At this point, Sam tells the station that they have located Sansker and that they're going to require backup because even though he doesn't quite know that Sansker is anything more than just a regular human right now, he's still very worried about what's going on, and he knows that something's up with how badly injured Twitch was. As he exits the vehicle, he points his gun at Sansker and instructs Sansker to give himself up, that he's going to be arrested, and basically, he's got charges of attempted murder coming his way. Sam also informs Sansker that he's under suspicion for the tenement massacres as well, and at this point, Sansker realizes that Sam has basically put the whole puzzle together as he begins to disrobe and states that it's not a big deal, as New York was essentially just a trial run for when he takes Hong Kong sometime next century. At this point, Sam's kind of confused and basically just asks him point blank, "What the hell even are you?" As Sansker continues to disrobe, he states that he's a gentleman, a very old one in fact, and that he was born in the year 1082, and that his original name was Jean de Saint Clair. And it was during the French Revolution that he was given the name Jean Sanscuor, which means Heartless John, apparently. I'm no expert on French, as any of you watching who do speak French have most likely been cringing at how poorly I've been pronouncing any French words. So I'm just going to take Alan Moore's word on this and hope that he's right. And at this point, Sam starts to get a little bit scared about what's happening and asks him why he's disrobing. And Sansker informs him that this is the way he likes to make his cull, and also he hates ruining his clothes as they're very expensive. Sam then realizes, my God, you cull people? You really are a vampire. However, Sansker informs him that he finds that term to be terribly racist, and that he prefers the term daylight disadvantaged, and that vampires aren't so different from humans as they put their pants on one leg at a time, the same way that humans do. Sam then realizes that Sansker was the one robbing the blood banks, and Sansker's like, well, of course, I'm not going to just go out here and drink blood from random strangers straight from the source. I want my blood screened. He then informs Sam that apparently the AIDS epidemic that was happening throughout the late 80s, mid to late 80s and early 90s, has also been affecting vampires, as it's apparently been getting them and withering them down to the bone. Now, he doesn't state that it necessarily kills them, which one would assume it doesn't, given that they are immortal, and it seems as though this should not be something that would cause them to die. But you also wouldn't think that they'd be able to catch infectious diseases that humans are susceptible to. So I don't know. That's kind of a weird little thing to throw in there. I guess it was just something because it was topical at the time. But it does seem really odd that vampires would be susceptible to bloodborne pathogens from human beings. At this point, Sam tries to reason with him again and tells him to give himself up. But Sansker says, oh, there's no point in doing that because none of you are going anywhere. As he starts to turn around and things start to look a little bit bad for Sam and the officers, some of which are the backup that he called in for. Meanwhile, back below the surface of the water, we see Spawn continuing his descent as he makes his way towards the chest that he locked his costume in. As he continues to hear her calling out to him and can hear her screams and the clatter as she senses him getting closer and is anxious to be reunited with him. As he finally gets to the chest and puts his hand over it, he thinks to himself, not long now, baby, not long. As at this point, Spawn's essentially treating his costume like a lover, which is kind of strange, but at this point, it seems a little bit natural as he's come to the conclusion that his costume is the only thing in this world that he can truly count on to never betray him. As Spawn then grabs the chest, he prepares himself to rip it open and free his costume. Back on the dock, Sam warns Sansker that they will open fire if he makes any sudden movements. However, Sansker, of course, is not worried about this in the least, as he leaps into the air and jumps over top of the officers, commenting as he does so how slow their movements seem, almost as if they're underwater, and that he wonders if this is in fact due to them just becoming slower as a species, or if he's just gotten faster over the centuries, as we see him kick his foot clean through the torso of one of the officers, grabs another officer at the same time by the head, and then rips it clean off. This, of course, shocks Sam as he calls out their names, Flynn and Ramirez. These officers, of course, are both dead at this point. And Sam realizes that they're maybe in way over their head and are not capable of dealing with Sansker. And back under the water, Spawn starts to grip and pull at the chest, noting that it does provide some resistance, but that with a little bit of coaxing, I guess would be the best word, he's able to open the lid and free the costume. We then see the costume spring up out of the chest as Spawn leans back, preparing himself to reunite with it once more. Back up on the dock, Sam runs back to one of the police cruisers and instructs the officer inside to radio back to the station for more backup. However, Sansker immediately jumps forward and starts to try and prevent this from happening, as he rips the hood of the police cruiser off, stating, no, we're not going to allow any more officers to be contacted. He then rips the engine out of the front of the car and throws it through the windshield, killing the officer inside, as he tells Sam that he's planning on blaming all of their deaths on Spawn, and that assuming Detective Williams dies, aka Twitch, that he might be able to even blame his death on Spawn as well with enough ingenuity. He then raises up his hand and prepares to deliver the final blow to Sam. However, he doesn't seem to notice the bubbling in the water just below his feet. We then get a 2-page vertical. Really, Tony and Kevin, you went the entire series without doing this one time, and then on the very last issue, you screw me like this. Thanks a lot, guys. But it does look pretty cool, I gotta say, as Spawn bursts up out of the surface of the water and lands on the dock and instructs Sansker to put Sam down. Sansker, of course, does this in the most violent way possible, throwing Sam upside down so that he lands on his head, and then asks what it is Spawn intends to do or what he wants. Spawn states that what he wants is answers, as what he had throughout his life as a Hellspawn wasn't much, but Sansker took it all from him, and he wants to know why. Sansker then states that the reason he's been doing this isn't anything personal against Spawn, he's just been moving from one city to the next, eliminating other monster hunters, which explains why he went after Curse when he first showed up to New York, as we saw in the preview to Blood Feud, and that he's also been eliminating other monsters. This is why he went after the Violator and Spawn, to try and basically kick them out of New York so that he could essentially take over the whole city. Now, the reason that he did this is because he actually finds Hong Kong to be a far more lucrative target, and he wanted to use New York as a trial run. At this point, Spawn just stops him and is like, you sound like a megalomaniac. And Sansker says, yeah, I've heard a lot of other people tell me that, and he starts listing other monsters that he's killed throughout the world, and states that Spawn has a lot in common with them because they're all dead, as he launches himself forward through the air and begins to attack Spawn once again. As he is much faster than Spawn, he gets the jump on him. However, Spawn's costume starts to react as we see one of its chains bash Sansker in the face. And Sansker says, you don't understand. Vlad Dracula's been dead for almost a century, and there's been no supreme ruler over the vampire tribes in his absence. And we now find out that Sansker's ultimate plan is to become the leader of all of the vampire legions so that he can lead them to take over the earth as a whole and basically turn the human population into their livestock. Sansker says that the human population will be cattle, but at this point Spawn's heard enough, as his costume throws Sansker off of him and slams him into the dock. And Spawn says, you may call them cattle, but have you ever seen what a heifer can do to a barn door? He then states that he doesn't believe he's ever seen anything that's lower than Sanskar, and that even the Violator looks wholesome by comparison. He then decides that this is an opportunity where he needs to use his powers, even though he typically tries to conserve them, as he grabs Sanskar by the face and hits him with a burst of necro energy. However, this does not have the desired effect, as not only does it not kill Sanskar, it doesn't seem to have really much of an effect on him at all. At this point, Sanskar realizes that Spawn's magic is coming from the depths of hell, and that it's something that could potentially hurt him, as he even starts to look down upon the hell dimensions, stating that it's probably one of those backwards ones where all of the demons still have goat's feet. But he says that, his is no different than, or his magic is no different than Spawn's when it gets down to brass tacks. And that's all just magic in the end, as he decides that since Spawn has shown him his, Sanskar will show Spawn his as well, as he transforms and reveals his true vampire form, and its rather monstrous and somewhat grotesque appearance with his long, drawn-out tongue, very similar to Venom in a sense, and his big fangs, and we see his skin turn the color gray. Of course, he gets the long, pointed ears, and his eyes turn red. He is a rather imposing sight, and given what he could do in his human form, you'd have to assume that in his true vampire form, he's even more dangerous. Sanskar once again collides with Spawn and continues his attack, taunting Spawn the whole time. However, in his distracted state, he does not realize that the sun is beginning to rise. He looks back and sees the sunlight as he covers his face with his hand, trying to block it. But then he turns around and begins to taunt Spawn once again, stating, "What, did you expect me to just burst into dust like you see in the movies?" He then states, "I'm not Bela Lugosi. I'm a vampire's vampire. I gargle with holy water and I pick my teeth with crucifixes. And I've survived the midday noon sun in the Sudan. So this is not something that's going to take me out." However, we notice that his body is beginning to smoke during all of this. Spawn says it looks like you could use a stronger sunblock. At this point, Sam has made his way back into one of the police cruisers and is radioing for all the backup that he can get, explaining that Sanskar is the one who's behind all the murders and that he murdered several of the officers that were originally here. Sanskar overhears all of this and realizes that at this point his plan is pretty much completely ruined, and that he's going to have to figure something else out if he wants to make it out of here without having his cover blown even more and give even more of the human population an alert to his presence. Sanskar then plops down in the middle of the street, and Spawn asks him what he's doing. Sanskar states that he's working on devising a new plan, as this plan is kind of done with, and he begins to melt and mold his legs together. Spawn is surprised and shocked when he sees this, and Sanskar says, "This is just transmutation, my friend." He then reaches over and grabs a nearby manhole cover, as we see that he is now turned into a large reptilian half-snake creature. I don't know if this is supposed to be just something that vampires can do in the Spawn universe, or if this is an ability he gained by killing one of these creatures in the past. He then states that he's going to make his escape and use what he's learned here to take Hong Kong in the year 2070, and he's now happy with the fact that he's at least destroyed Spawn. He then tells Spawn, you no longer have your CIA friend, the bums have turned on you, the entire New York public thinks you're a vampire, and now you're banished to the shadows with all the rest of the monsters like myself. Welcome to the night," as he slips down into the sewers and makes his escape. Sam tries to reason with Spawn, stating, "Hey, no, listen, we can still sort all this out. If you just come with us down to the station and answer a few questions, I can basically, smooth everything over for you and let the police know that you're not the one who's behind these killings." However, Spawn is thinking to himself, realizing that Sanskar is indeed right, and there's no way that he's going to be able to just go down to the police station and explain to them, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm this dead guy who was brought back from the 8th circle of hell and given all these superpowers, and, I have been killing people, but I didn't kill the people that you are accusing me of in the tenements, and I didn't attack, Williams or kill any of these police officers." The whole thing is just too much for any police interrogation to just be like, "Yeah, we're going to let you go, buddy. No problems here." Spawn takes off running towards the end of the pier as Sam pleads with him to not jump. However, Spawn leaps into the water and thinks to himself that the darkness is like a mother that will soothe him and take away his pain, and that down here under the water, it's always night and it's always dark, and that the flickering light from above can't penetrate and can no longer harm him, as he's essentially just decided that from now on, the night will be his mistress, and it will comfort him and care for him in a way that the light of the day never could. As we see the final thought bubble says, "Welcome to the night," as this is a definite real transition for Spawn as a character, as he's more so embracing his role as a Hellspawn and essentially leaving the light of day and no longer having to face what secrets it may uncover, which is not necessarily a good thing in terms of how it is playing into the plans of the Mabulja. We then, of course, reach our old friend Image Info, which is, again, just a bunch of random blurb facts about Image comics and comic books that were coming out in 1995, so I'm not going to dwell on that. We then reach the spawning grounds. This, of course, is the letter section where readers get to write in and have their letters possibly responded to by Todd McFarlane. And this one's actually pretty interesting. We see here down in the corner a speech bubble. This is the speech bubble from issue number 3 that had the word killing for some reason left out of it. But they're like, hey, this is what it should have looked like. Okay, sure, that's a really weird way to do it. I mean, most people probably filled in the blanks and kind of figured out exactly what it was supposed to say. But they're like, hey, we decided to go ahead and reprint just this one speech bubble to show you where we messed up. However, right here, where Todd is getting a chance to just kind of talk a little bit about what's going on with Spawn, he does announce a brand new character that will be coming out called Apex, spelled Ape, A-P-E -X. Now, those of you who are fans of Spawn probably realize that this is in fact the character that we now know today as Cygor, which is so much better of a name than Apex. That's such a stupid way to do it. There's nothing that would have made that character seem more goofy than calling him Apex and spelling it Ape-X. Cygor is a far better and far cooler sounding name for that character, and he will be coming up in the next few months as we progress further into the mainline ongoing Spawn series, so stay tuned and you'll get to see where Cygor's first appearance happens. Now, getting into the letters, one reader writes in, and this reader is also a comic book retailer, and he's trying to bring up important details that people who don't actually work in the industry wouldn't know about. This has to do with, at the time, DC had just recently signed an exclusive distribution deal with Diamond Direct, and Marvel had also signed their own exclusive deal with Heroes World, which was making things very difficult for retailers in terms of how they were having to order their books. It was increasing the cost, making a whole real problem for all of them. Now, in the future world of 2025, we're dealing with this same thing all over again. As we've seen that Marvel has now moved their distribution over to Penguin Press. I forget who DC is moved to now, but Diamond has lost both of these. And if you're watching this in real time, which is now March of 2025, you may know that Diamond has actually filed for bankruptcy in the year 2025. I believe they filed for it back in January, and are seeking Chapter 11 protections and trying to reorganize. So it's kind of funny to see that 30 years later, things are kind of in the exact same spot as they were back then. And it seems like it's all just kind of, what goes around comes around once again. Another reader also writes in, bringing up a point that I've made about a lot of different publishers doing this, and as far as I know, it's still happening to this day, about people putting out, or companies putting out, multiple books about the exact same character every single month, and how much of a strain that puts on people's wallets. This was a real problem, I know, during the New 52, especially if you were following Batman at that time. I forget how many there were, but there were like 6 or 7 Batman titles, And if you wanted to get the complete story, you had to be buying all of them. And it was such a pain, and it was such a strain on people's wallets. I was actually subbed to Batman at that time, and I quit reading just for that fact, is that there were so many story points that were happening in the other Bat titles that I wasn't subbed to, and I really just didn't feel like buying, 6 or 7 books every single month to get the story for one character. So I just said, screw it. I'm not going to subscribe to Batman, and DC just lost my money from that. And I know that, they're thinking, okay, well, we can increase profits by getting people to buy more books. And it's like, yeah, but you're doing it in like kind of the most scumbag way that you can do it. So maybe just make more books that are really, really good to get people to follow more than just one character. And you can increase your sales by providing a better value, not by trying to, force people to buy as, many books as you can sell them so that they can get the story to the one character they care about. And then the last letter that I find really kind of interesting is a guy writes in basically complaining because Todd is re-releasing wave 1 of his action figures so that the people who weren't able to find them before would have a chance to get them now, as his first wave was very difficult to find. This guy is upset because, in his words, he's ruining the collector's value of the figures that were sold previously and all the people who got their hands on them, which is such a dirtbag way to think. Like, you're mad that Todd is trying to meet the demands of his customers because it's going to potentially affect the value of the figures that you've already purchased. It's like, dude, how much more selfish can you be? Like, I get it. Like, you bought these things as an investment property, but like the fact that you're mad at Todd for trying to deliver for his customers and fans because you're afraid it's going to hurt your potential investment in the future is just showing what kind of a dirtbag you really are, man. I can't believe this guy even wrote in with that letter. But to Todd's credit, he was actually kind of easy on the guy and didn't, insult him the way that I am right now. We then reach the end cap section. Now, this is the exact same end cap that was published in the previous issue of Spawn that I did a video on last week, Spawn number 35. So if you want to know my thoughts about this, you can check them out in that video. I won't bore you with going over all of the same talking points a second time. We then get an advertisement for Bad Boy Con 95. I don't know if this convention still exists. This was happening, I believe, in Phoenix, Arizona. Maybe it's still around. Maybe it was really good back in 95. If you were there and have any information you'd like to share with me about it, I would love to see it in the comment section below. And then we get an advertisement for Spawn number 36. There's just one problem. This is the cover of Spawn number 34. I don't know why you would show the cover of issue number 34 in an advertisement for issue number 36, but apparently that was what Todd decided to go with. Way to go, buddy. On the final page, we get an advertisement where you can send away to order for Spawn trading cards and toys and trade papers and comic books. This is, I'm sure, really cool back in 1995 when just buying this stuff on the internet wasn't really so easily available to most people. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the Savage Dragon number 23. Now, as of recording this video, I have not made it all the way to issue number 23 in my Savage Dragon series yet. However, if you would like to know more about Savage Dragon, you can check out the videos I have done in my Savage Dragon playlist. And that was Spawn Blood Feud number 4. And I gotta say, when I started doing all of these for the video series, I remembered not liking this miniseries all that much when I initially read it. Whoever knows how long ago, decades or more. But going back and rereading it for these videos, I actually found myself enjoying this miniseries a lot. I really enjoy the artwork. Tony Daniels and Kevin Conrad really kind of knock it out of the park, in my opinion. The video, or the series as a whole, brings up some interesting story points. I really like that it introduces vampires and other mythical creatures into the Spawn universe. I believe that Sansker as a whole is a really interesting character. I also like how it provides an explanation for Spawn's motivations going forward and the way he chooses to deal with his problems and handle things. My only complaint would be that they basically telegraph almost from issue number 1 that Sansker is the vampire and that he's the one who's setting Spawn up. That could have been handled better, as they could have made it more of a big reveal at the end of issue number 3 or even the beginning of this issue here. That's the one thing I would have done different about all of this. But outside of that, I feel like overall it's a really great miniseries. And I like the whole idea of showing how Spawn is now dealing with all these people that he thought he could count on now turning on him. And now he's basically just giving himself to the night. Now, once again, these are all my opinions. Your opinions may be completely different. You might have hated the whole thing. You might have thought it was terrible. Then the artwork sucked and all of that. But if that's the case, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.